All right. Welcome everyone to Spoken and Heard. My name is Leah Madry, and I'm the Executive Director of the Dairy Barn Arts Center. And I wanted to take a moment just to welcome you all this evening. The Dairy Barn is a nonprofit art center that was established in 1978 in a really fantastic historic dairy barn that was about to be torn down, and the community stepped in to save it and to turn it into this wonderful artistic space. We typically have about 4 main exhibitions a year that range from internationally renowned exhibitions like Quilt National and Wide Open, our photography exhibit, all the way to regionally based exhibits like Women of Appalachia and OH+5. We have a whole myriad of education programs as well for adults through youth and several art-based events per year. Our mission is rooted in its unique history. The Dairy Barn Arts Center enriches lives and cultivates community through equitable access to the arts. I would also like to introduce you to this evening's host. Ohio Poet Laureate Carrie Gunter Seymour focuses on lifting up underrepresented voices, including incarcerated adults and women in recovery. Her collection, Alone in the House of My Heart, was selected 2023 Best Book Award from American Book Fest and finalist for the National Indie Excellence Award. She is an artist in residence for the Writing the Land Project, a Pillars of Prosperity Fellow for the Foundation of Appalachian Ohio, and the founder and executive director of the Women of Appalachia Project, and editor of its anthology series, Women Speak. Her work has been featured on Verse Daily, Poem of the Week, World Literature Today, the New York Times, and Poem a Day. And of course, you can find her at carriegunterseymourpoet.com. Carrie, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's a pleasure to have you.
Oh, thank you, Leah, so much for that lovely introduction. And thank you to the barn for hosting us. And I want to be sure to welcome our audience tonight that's here with us. And to also mention that those who couldn't make it this evening will be able to stream later on Facebook and YouTube. And we're always excited for that as well. Again, I want to thank the fine folks behind the scenes of the Dairy Barn Arts Center for hosting us, and to the Ohio Arts Council for sponsoring the 2024 season of Spoken and Heard. So tonight, hold on to your hats. We will enjoy both poetry and creative nonfiction provided by the excellent Darius Stewart and Ben Klein. It is such a pleasure for me to bring these voices to all of you. And I know some of you have heard them and some of you had not, but what a wonderful time together we're going to have tonight. So let's begin. Ben Klein hails from the farmland valleys of West Appalachia and currently lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. He is the author of Dead Uncles and the forthcoming It Was Never Supposed to Be. Ben is a storyteller, poet, and Madonna mega fan. His work appears in Poet Lore, Diagram, Coppernickel, Mayday, Florida Review, Bellingham Review, Square Review, Poetry, South Carolina Review, and many other publications. And you can learn more about his work at benkleinonline.wordpress.com. And I wanted to tell you, I met Ben through my I Thought I Heard a Cardinal Sing project, which we celebrated last month at Spoken and Heard. And through a number of interactions, we've come to know each other and each other's work. And Ben is at the University of Cincinnati, where he does a number of things, believe me, but he also conceived this project and implemented it. And it's a reading series called Poetry Stacked, which offers up a mix of UC, MFA, and PhD poets, along with a sprinkling of renowned poets at this point from the tri-state area, and who knows what's going to happen in the future with this project. It keeps growing and growing. It's outgrowing its space that the university has provided for it. It's really exceptional and wonderful. There's always a huge crowd, and the poetry, as you can imagine, is stunning, as is Ben's own poetry. So I want to encourage you to buy Ben's books at his website, Ben Klein Online, wordpress.com. And I am so pleased and proud to welcome the fabulous Ben Klein.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Carrie. Thank you to Carrie and Leah for organizing tonight. Thank you, Darius, for joining me. I'm excited. I'm going to keep it real twangy tonight. We got the cows behind me. And, always check out Poetry Stacked at the University of Cincinnati. You can follow UC at UC Libraries on Instagram and get all the latest on Poetry Stacked. I start with a few poems from Dead Uncles, which started as an opening chapter in a manuscript twang, literally named after my twang, that actually it's not announced yet, but it's going to come out next year. The publisher is still finalizing all the details. They're going to announce it. So I'm going to read from Dead Uncles in twang tonight and keep it down on the farm. For those of you who don't know, I grew up in the southernmost tip of Ohio's heart. I like to say where the river runs north and Kentucky, West Virginia, and Ohio get confused with each other. So, all right, let's get it started. This is the opening poem of Dead Uncles, and it's called A Pile. A gathering of young cousins is called a pile. It's not a reunion without aunts and dead uncles. Oak leaves from the same root share a shape, a half acre, innumerate shades. They play volleyball across a white rope tying two eastern hemlocks. In the cemetery, paper plates become bases, fingertips and loose fists, static, hair in the eye, a pile growing. At a reunion, ants flit around, scooping limp green beans and macaroni salad onto compartment foam plates. Nothing and no one touches. Uncles roll joints, discuss old girlfriends, dismiss the meal closing before Christmas. Elbows and tight fists. A gathering of dead uncles is called a reverie. It's not a daydream if you must suspend all disbelief. All right, I should read one that I don't read a lot. This is one of my spell poems. And trigger warning, this poem deals with drug addiction. Giving up the dew. Sneak through straight rain into dusk's silver linger. Find two wigglers surface, pink, pale as raw chicken. Pick them from grass, never concrete. Give them the names of your best former lovers. Chop them into fourths. Drop each gooey eighth into a red plastic cup. Add 2 pinches of sodium chloride and bicarbonate, a churned mouthful of spit, 1 flake of willow bark to all 8. Cross the pasture as they stew. Collect 4 half cups of ditch water. Avoid leaves, drown squirrels, dry raven feathers atop the stream. On your way back, yank a tuft of bloomed fescue. Shred it with your lower left incisor, the one you chipped in our Christmas fight. Got stuck. Once home, repeat those lovers' names 3 times as you drool your weed cud into the 2nd and 5th cups. Wash your hands. Chug the 1st cup from the ditch, quickly holding your breath. Sip the 2nd, the 3rd, a 4th if you can. Your belly might swell, your flank might rumble. God or Satan might come through with fire. Rest until you cool. Ghosts climbing out your lungs, whispering mid-morning, Father, too close, myrrh, fist, thunder. Cemetery precinct. Now, where I'm from, the politicians in the 70s and 80s and the 90s, they would always get extraordinary amounts of votes from their deceased cemetery precinct. Mom calls the graveyard beside my school a cemetery precinct, not because she works the polling station in the gymnasium every November, completing ballots for our uncles in the east line of faded tombstones, or because winners are alleged to write history. For the family, she insists, stuffing sheets from her purse into the machine. The graves are too close for our tall people, bejeweled by dental fillings, shallow to sinkholes, hiding places for sophomores anxious to be voted most likable for best shade. Their dead are names we inherit, sometimes edit in the set 977.1 section at the library. Mom says we have to keep Uncle Linus in office. Think it through. I imagine the cemetery under a strip mall, school kids at a new froyo shop, kissing with icy lips to select a class treasurer. The graves accessible in the sub-basement. Uncle Linus, propped in the corner, slack white mandible holding a "Vote Field for Progress" sign. Ghosts wander the tunnel around the walk-in freezer, complaining about the damp. I love that poem. It's so fun. I hope everyone has enjoyed some of this beautiful weather today. Well, I'm going to read this one. I'm going to read the closing poem of Dead Uncles because I never read it. Corpse Reviver. Seeing isn't always knowing. Past a rainy Monday night's fourth corpse reviver #2, circling back to dead uncles I resemble when I slick my black curls like I'm as Uncle Craig used to drag his ooze until Marlboros ate his throat that warm December. The future isn't always messy. Big Rich's midday widowmaker accelerating his Cadillac through a Dallas intersection, killing him, a pigeon, 3 strangers that April Tuesday. I don't know anything about those strangers. I don't know their names or see them falling in love with a nurse after the second battle of the Hook, their blood splattering the windshield. They remain mysterious like Uncle Joe, that swampy August Friday the deputies found him prostrate in a raft on Crystal Lake, missing his pants, his left pinky, a grand of his boss's snow. I only saw his stiff limbs and closed fists, Uncle Rick counting pills, placing them in neat rows. No amount of knowing changes the outcome. Dead uncles blue in the face, red leaving their lips. All right, we're going to move on from that and we're going to move on to some twang stuff, but 2 of the selections from twang actually were in Carrie's amazing anthology. I thought I heard a cardinal sing, I have to say. My dearly deceased mother, this was the only thing that she was ever happy to see me publish, and she owned 2 copies, and well, but you know, she dug it. Let us pray. Our pile of cousins congregates at 8:30, stacks hickory and elm atop old tribunes, oak leaves gasping for the match. The first cousins bring beer and joints, plastic jugs of sour water to numb our tongues. Above the pit and switchgrass, embers crack darkness. Coals stay up all night. Pop, pretzels, and chips. Sleeping bags arrive with the second cousins. Ursa Major watches. The third's crack cover story, like cash for next time. Every cousin brings their pocket knife. I open mine last, cleanse the blade with spit and flame. It glows, a stick of sunset, cooling pink as inside my lips. In the pile, I split my ring finger's tip, blood hissing between tongues and smoke. The cut flares. Did you know, a third asked, fire is a chemical reaction outside of any state of matter? Yes, I do, wavering between starlight and our ash. Enjoy that poem. All right, I'll wait for that one. All right, now I'm going to read some stuff from Twang, and I'm going to read a piece that has not ever been published anywhere, but it's the new opener that I'm convinced got somebody to say yes to this book finally. August is a running theme through Twang. The month and the mood and the heat show up in a lot of the poems in this manuscript. And there's play on the word, the roots like aug and augur and August and the different meanings of August. So the opening poem is called Augur. Every summer, the field between our house and the creek cracked, zigzags wide enough to hide a copperhead or break an ankle. Not from drought, Dad said, just August. Even in wet years, when young corn crowded the fence, stalks would vanish at dusk, turn up in the winter plow. Like my older cousins, ripe with pick musk and cedar rub, who went to town Saturday looking for tonight or a wife, who turned up Sunday, sliding into the last pew after the first reading. In drought or fallow seasons, the field rolled too, bearing its silt belly and old ash, an occasional femur. Dad said a fella could vanish in its soft spots. Ironweeds, patting the soil, digging holes by hand. I found dust and molts, seeds and starling shit, not a single spot into which I could vanish like my uncle deep into his fifth, mumbling about me not liking girls the right way. But I kept digging through orphan roots and detritus, germinating, ready. All right. Oh, I already read Let Us Pray. That poem is too many pages. I like this one. This is a Shinto. A Shinto, if you don't know, is a poem composed entirely of text from it's sort of a found poem, but typically you use other poetry. I decided to do a Shinto for 1985, and you will recognize a lot of hits. Well, if you're in the right age group, you will recognize a lot of hits, a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows from 1985. This is called Shinto from 1985. You're listening to 85.5 WFLD in a small town where everyone knows your family name at church picnics, the five and dime where Mr. McPhee asked me about those concentric hexagons I drove in the new cornfield, and the pickup truck strangers give it one more night. Make the most of the dark and red dawn, taking their broken wings to learn what happens head over heels. The tractor never surrenders to dry clods, killdeer eggs, someone who cares where we go, what we do, taking me with him to build the city every time he goes away, not wanting to rule the world the way my father shouts, letting my mother's silence out. Take me on beyond these hills. You've tuned in to 85.5, all the hits on which I can't dance for inspiration. Would I lie to you? Careless whispers are when you love somebody and things can only get better. Hexagons become rectangles. Easy lovers hold on. Growing pains, my knees. But how will I know if I belong to the city, the night, lizard-tongued men eating rats, a dynasty, or a friend back again, a party of new confidants? I slow it down. Use my gum to plug a hydraulic leak, not needing another hero who could show me back to the future brimming with boys of summer, walking sunshine alive, kicking down the fortress around my heart. The 80s kid in me just loves that poem. All right, this is one of the two poems that was published in poetry a couple years ago. Never thought I would show up in poetry. It was a lifelong dream, and they published a couple of poems. And this one is the Hayfield Prayer, which gets into the Appalachian difference of yuns from the southern y'all. Grinding between third and fourth, the tractor dry heaved. I said yuns instead of y'all, Dad shouting from the hay wagon, invoking God and the flat tar, the groundhog hole I didn't clear, rain threatening to ruin the alfalfa he rolled into rows for the baler. Dad's trash pit plumed charcoal over us and the narrow holler field. Sparrows and starlings circled, only crows went through. They know, Dad said, the pit's far could handle cherubs weeping. It burned for days, a small star swaddled in silica and fertilizer bags. I could handle the switch cut from the crick maple with Dad's pocket knife, leaves stripped by his callous hand. I thought of Seraphim as he approached, and the tractor died. A lot of twang also deals with the AIDS crisis and what it was like to experience that in Appalachia. I was just behind a generation that disappeared by the mid 90s. So yeah, and lost my mom's youngest brother to AIDS related causes in 1992. He was only 28. It's crazy. This is Silence Equals Death. Peter Jennings broke into the Pepsi commercial. Rock Hudson dead at 59 from AIDS. The graphic footage of his sunken face wobbling through a recent segment with Doris Day. My city grandma gasped. I didn't. I knew about Rock Hudson already. Grandma and I spent afternoons watching instead of Looney Tunes. For 90 minutes, she neglected her cigarettes, and I breathed loose and free, clapping along to the song, lobbing the blue pillows across the coffee table as we kicked our legs in the air. I always opened another butterscotch while mouthing, talk about the boy I'm going to marry someday. We swooned when Rock lifted his leg above the bubbles, but only I knew why his grin curled that way, what lurked in the long pauses wedged between the disappointments his characters uttered. Grandma often dozed off during You Lied, waking for the tidy ending that ignored his fluttered up gaze, his debonair swoop I mimicked around my aunts, uncles who squinted when I spoke too fast with my hands. I knew, but I didn't want to change my name or lie about having a strange cancer in Paris. I didn't want to die young, ahead of Grandma to me from a future I knew could be mine. Let me check time. Oh, I've got like 5 more minutes. Oh, let me jump ahead. This poem, I don't submit to a lot of contests, but this poem actually won the Patricia Godeke Prize in 2021 from Cut Bank Literary. I retitled it. It used to be called How to Behead a Snake, but somebody told me that would be off-putting to readers, so I changed it to be more direct about what the poem is about, and it's now titled Bullies. Do 50 push-ups. Saunter like your uncle showed you to the sunbathing garter's tail. Grab it. Enthrall the city kids, girlfriends, the bullies throwing rocks at the goats. Shake it to confusion, dodging bite. An absence of venom lessens no pain. Twirl it until it's a corkscrew ribbon and someone says, ooh. Take a deep breath. Wipe any sweat on your jeans. Never try it in shorts or a swimsuit. Crack it like a wet whip, snapping between your knees, a loose flick yanked into your chest. Someone will always yell, oh shit, and at least 2 people will puke when the snake's head pops clean off its glottis. Unblinking eyes scattering like marbles, the nearby cats kick around until the football players return to the bus. Toss the carcass in the weeds. Sit in the seat behind the driver, under her mirror, where she can't see you slipping tips down your pants, dodging the beating you took last time. I like this poem. In 5 South, this is called Second Cousins. 2 boys from our town branch slipped under in the preacher's grip, holding what he told us about bones in the pond muck, holding back tears their fathers would belt dry. He held them, repeating their names until they gargled back to life. Praise be, red mud gushing out their noses. Everybody on the shore clapped, praise be. I kept my switchblade quiet, eyes wide in the murk, his splitting ripples, sawgrass, ours and cheap cigarettes by the like danger. I wanted to be believed, to skinny dip, see the preacher had changed, though I knew he hadn't. Everyone watching had my last name, knew the same dead too. And I knew we were bones, praise be. If anyone parted the water, would they see what happened to us? All right, I am gonna jump way ahead. Want to read, where is it? I want to finish. I've started writing these poems. I'm calling them holler psalms. And this one was just published at Pithead Chapel, and it's probably, there might be one more that will go into twang before it gets published next year, but I really like this one. It was inspired by my granny. It's called Holler Psalm, chapter 6, verse 2. Bless your femurs of iron ore. Grandma said hers too were once sturdy in winter ice, stern against summer's August core. May they steal you through Manhattan canyons. Bless your flinty Ocelcranon, sparking every time your uncle shattered empty bottles against it. Your silica ulna, your father behind his silent concessions. He was all talk, clavicle slack under his brother's weighty rage. Bless your phosphate kneecaps. Bless your graphite nails and feldspar fingers, grasping strangers in the dark without leaving a mark. May they always pleasure the world. Bless the quartz click-clack of your nails on your manual typewriter, the poems you write when your mother refused to play along, called herself coal, absorbing any light she could, stowing it in her marrow of slick mud and thick silt, a sinking you learned as love. May your chalk wrist continue saying otherwise, swinging below the line, belts, drawing stall art, new memes, and last names, a life in the margins. Bless the shale storing your past behind your sternum. Bless the dolomite sockets of your diamond eyes, set to stun straight on or from the side, depending on the fella, day, and time. Bless your gypsum lips, you know why. That's all I have for you this evening. Thank you very much for joining us, and I turn it back over to Carrie.
Oh, Ben. Oh, friend, you never disappoint. And that was just wonderful. I am so glad we got to hear some of your newer work that maybe you haven't posted yet. And yeah, that was so wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So we're going to move on now. It's hard because we love to be able to ingest what we've just heard. So I'm just going to kind of talk slow right now so we can do that before we move into the marvelous Darius Stewart. Darius of Intimacies in Borrowed Light from Eastover Press, and his newest, Be Not Afraid of My Body, a lyrical memoir. His poetry and creative nonfiction essays appear or are forthcoming in Arkansas International, Brink, the Brooklyn Review, Callaloo, Cimarron Review, Fourth Genre, Gargoyle, Meridian, the Potomac Review, Salamander, Stories South, Verse Daily, on and on and on. Darius received an MFA in poetry from the Michener Center for Writers at the University of Texas at Austin, and an MFA from the Nonfiction Writing Program at the University of Iowa. In 2021, the East Tennessee Writers Hall of Fame honored him with the inaugural Emerging Writer Award. He is currently a Lulu Merle Johnson Doctoral Fellow in the English Department at the University of Iowa. You can order Darius's books from his website, Darius Antwan, as an ANTWAN.com. Now, here's the thing. I had to travel across the country to meet Darius. It was well worth the trip. We met in Seattle last year at the AWP conference. We are both, with my recent book, we are now both authors of Eastover Press. And Darius is one of those great, good folks that you meet, and immediately he creates a space of shared energies and goodwill. And I'm so happy to have him here with us tonight. Welcome, Darius.
Thank you so much, Carrie and Ben. That was, oh my God, that was tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. And yeah, thank you for getting us started. So I said before we started the event, behind the scenes, I guess, I was praying about being able to speak properly because I had to get a filling today of all days. And the left side of my mouth has been very numb, and it's actually uh I have sensation again. So I got very lucky, I suppose. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading from the last section of Be Not Afraid of My Body. It's the sixth section, and that section is entitled You Don't Have to Like It. I'll be reading from several different pieces, but I won't stop in between. I'm trying to create a kind of singular experience with these disparate pieces, and hopefully it'll make sense for you all. So let me get started here. I'm in my late 20s when I finally stopped playing the generous, the pretty boys wanted to enter the pleasure dome in less than full regalia. Now, a decade later, I fear I might be stuck the ick. There's a tickle in my throat that won't go away. I force myself to laugh as if this might clear the festering obstruction lodged to my airway. I can breathe, but I have a devil of a time. I feel choked up, thinking it might be possible my blood is streaming with razor wire inside my body. A part of me wants to hunker down and pray that I survive, but I seldom do pray. On occasion, and usually in a moment of duress. And what greater time would that be than now, when the prospect of living with the ick brings me so much stress? I hope it doesn't mean I'm cursed to death for my, how shall I put it, past activities. Imagine a pair of lips slightly parted, tongues wrapped with aphasia, bodies curled serpentine one moment and the next, hands pressing faces hard against iced over windows, open mouths warming the glass with ecstatic breath, leaving fading impressions against the panes. I do. Such is the life of an incubus, of two men and another and still more, who long to be heaved together in a clearing on a balmy night, bejeweled with sweat, and hour after hour they undress night's recriminations. They leave it bare. They want an incubus to no longer be a demon, but an answered prayer. I'd been experiencing several nights of little sleep, nights I'd spent positioning myself so I no longer felt this drowning sensation in my chest, positions that found me ultimately placing a pillow against the living room wall so that I might finally fall asleep standing straight up, which I decided was unusual. And so I called Mama, as I'd done only a couple of months before, to return me to St. Mary's Hospital so that I might know what was happening inside my body. An EKG and an hour or so later, the urgent care cardiologist explained that because he discovered my heart was functioning at only 23%, this indicated congestive heart failure, or more importantly, he emphasized a severe chance of sudden cardiac arrest. I was admitted into the hospital at once. Days that followed, in addition to my parents' bedside vigilance and check-ins from nurses, techs, and administrative staff members, several doctors had been consulting one another, rummaging through their expert knowledge until they arrived at a consensus as to why a man 36 years old had congestive heart failure, but no family history of heart disease. They noted in my chart possible causes of systolic heart failure for this patient, reports history of cocaine use, and also reports history of extensive alcoholism. I'd been having trouble maneuvering my arms and hands behind me to cinch together the back of my hospital gown as tightly as I could to keep the cold air off my skin. The effort took the breath from me, the result, surely, of my heart condition. I wondered if the seams of the windows had come unglued somehow, allowing in a steady stream of cold air that would turn everything to frost. I bunched myself against the pillows and tugged the blanket and sheets close to my chest to keep from trembling. I humored myself by imagining that if the urban legends were true, then my shivering was due to someone at that very moment walking across the future site of my grave. Dr. Flowers was the attending physician, and on the third day of my stay in the hospital, he informed me of the possible etiologies for congestive heart failure. In other words, how this could have happened to me. It's possible, he said, that extensive alcoholism damaged your heart to the point that now it's failing. Dr. Flowers had more news. My heart condition had other possible causes. Several months after coming out to Mama, I decided to tell her while we were shopping at the grocery store on a Sunday afternoon that I'd exposed myself to HIV. We'd started in the produce section looking for fruit. She sampled a handful of grapes, then inspected a variety of apples, but decided against them. She placed a bunch of bananas in her cart and wheeled over to the cantaloupe and honeydew, but became distracted by the watermelon. She didn't thump or smell them like one was supposed to do, but slightly rolled each one back and forth, looking at me as if I might help her decide which one was the best. You still eat watermelon, don't you? She asked, hovering over a large one as if she were wielding her carving knife, waiting for me to give her the go-ahead to slice into the melon's red meat. I wanted to tell her no, that I hated it, admit to her that even as a kid, I hadn't liked watermelon or being made to sit on the front porch of our first house on East Fifth Avenue in the warm spring sunshine to eat it, to let the juice run down my chin, spitting out the seeds, tossing the rind across the street like a one-way boomerang. I shook my head no, then told her that I had recently gotten tested for HIV. I walked our cart away from the produce, failing to mention that I'd had to get tested because I'd been hooking up with Tyson, who I learned from Perry turned out to be positive. She was silent, walking ahead of me, her composure noticeably shifting from cheerful to troubled. But don't worry, I said, I'm negative. You see, this is what I'm talking about, she said, as though I'd ruined a perfectly fine day grocery shopping. What is that supposed to mean? I asked. Nothing, Darius, she said. I hesitated to press her further. I just told her that her gay son had been exposed to HIV because he'd met with a man who tested positive for the virus. And what had she told me when I'd come out to her those months ago? That she knew I was gay, or at least that she had suspected I was for years. And hadn't she implied that her mother's intuition was infallible? Hadn't she meant to warn me how concerned she was for me in this lifestyle? Had she not said she didn't want to believe I was gay? It would worry her endlessly. She was my mother and couldn't help but want to protect me from those consequences that frightened her most. That I had sex with men, only she couldn't say it. What's wrong, Mama? I asked. She continued to push her cart down the aisle, selecting an assortment of canned vegetables, thinking how to respond to me. I'd seen this careful deliberation many times before, when I was a young boy and she had to decide between disappointing me or doing what was best for me. This was probably why she was so matter of fact when she finally said, "You don't have to like it, Darius." She delivered her words as if they were born from instinct. You don't have to like it. She responded to my question, what's wrong, with an answer that was intentionally shorthand, encompassing everything that it must represent to her: desire, fear, recklessness, homosex. My initial impulse was to forget what she'd said so her words wouldn't erase my fondest versions of her. There came the sudden flash of me as a young boy, waiting on the corner for her to step off the K-Trans city bus in Knoxville. I'd been away for a week at summer camp, and when I returned home, she was still at work until sometime after 3 o'clock, when I walked to the corner to wait for her. Stepped up, saw me, she ran across the street, set down her nursing bag, and lifted me into the air to hug me. We walked back to our apartment as I talked excitedly about canoeing and venturing to the edge of a waterfall where it was shallow enough to get out of the boat and stand over the small cliff to watch the water topple into the whirling waters below. This was the earliest memory I had of clearly knowing how much my mother loved me. Now, a dark curtain had fallen, cordoning that memory off, and an eerie scene began to develop in which we were somehow cast into a tragedy right there in the middle of the grocery store aisle. I imagined the ghostly chorus emerging from behind the cereal boxes, the loaves of bread, gliding toward us on their shopping carts, their mouths so rife with molasses and heavy jams they could only moan deeply, expressing my grief in mournful song. We ran several tests, Dr. Flower said, but what he didn't say was, the results are not what we expected. He explained how they figured it all out, rattling off the context clues for what could have caused congestive heart failure, extensive alcohol abuse, other factors such as a few recent bouts of pneumonia I'd overcome, my sexual history. My sexual history? Is this what put me in the hospital? Well, obvious that my sex life was the culprit, as evidenced by the assemblage of papers bulging inside the file folder Dr. Flowers held in his hands, as if there were pages of salacious stories threatening to scatter onto the floor, dispersing so that each sheet would collide noisily, all that rowdy shuffling reminiscent of the muffled who filled many rooms during many encounters from many years ago. Your heart condition could have been caused by a virus, Dr. Flowers said. So we checked. Of course, I perked up when I heard the word virus. How often he repeated it in what seemed to be a series of fragmented phrases. You may have contracted a virus. We cannot rule out the possibility that your heart failure is due to a virus we discovered. Mr. Virus, virus, virus. Somehow I missed Dr. Flowers clearly asking me, are you aware that you're HIV positive? I couldn't pinpoint when it was exactly, but I used to experience these inklings that something was wrong, had always been wrong with my body. That's why I wasn't too surprised, really, when Dr. Flowers said my test had come back positive for HIV. I might have flinched at the news the way you do when looking away from the needle that pricks your skin to draw blood. You don't have to see it to feel it. I'd just been told that I'd contracted HIV, and as if it was my only recourse, I smirked at the news, knowing I'd squandered every opportunity I might have had to prevent this diagnosis. I chuckled so quietly that it didn't register until I felt the subtle laughter vibrating inside my chest. How mercilessly I'd forced my body to refuse its own pleas for help. Years I'd spent destroying my body. When I really thought about the condition I was in, congestive heart failure, HIV, I didn't know how much more of this I could continue to find so laughable, so absurd. I thought about the diminishing pleasures of succumbing to lust. I thought about death since I'd been hit with a twofer, CAT. I thought about people's capacity for empathy. I thought about petty grievances of being talked about behind my back, how people would worry themselves, knowing that even when they understood we weren't living in the 1980s heyday of the virus, they still would think of me and fear how closely they might have come to being infected themselves, whenever they remembered those seemingly innocuous intimacies, like the one time we pecked on the mouth in greeting or gave one another lingering hugs at our departure, just to feel the warmth of the in a little longer. Ruthless, the way those to my consciousness. I was filled with so much regret, my life reduced to a list of ifs. If I had not drunk so much and snorted so much and tripped so much and spent so many nights begging for attention like a castaway beneath the highway underpasses, a beggar rejected to the gutters. If I had not smiled deceitfully into all those blank yet still bereaved faces of my friends who saw me as a man turning slowly into a disease. If sex had not been too easy to find or had continued to be always a solution. If only I could start all over again, an innocent boy swooning outside the fence of a basketball court, enjoying a spear of summer grass set between his teeth. When I was able, I looked Dr. Flowers in the face, into the perfect candor in his eyes, and told him that I hadn't been aware that I had HIV. He appeared sincerely compassionate, the way only a man who probably gardened on weekends, spending hours with his hands plunging through soft dirt, could contain such grace. As he turned to leave, as if I'd gotten myself into some kind of trouble, I said to him, "You aren't going to tell my parents, are you?" He looked at me surprised. "You'd like me to?" "No," I said. The medical social worker at St. Mary's told me to expect a call from a volunteer at the Knox County Health Department's Centers of Excellence. His name was Ray. He didn't give a last name. He was very matter of fact. "It's urgent business," he told me, "that you've tested positive for HIV. "Yes, I know," I said. "So you do confirm this diagnosis," he said. I was confused that he didn't seem to understand this was what I meant. I wondered about his age. I could tell he was old. His voice labored with a raspy drawl that decades of abuse had worn thin. But this was a petty thought, indicating my grief, I suppose. Though a part of me, because of his age, felt judged by a man who sounded generations removed from me, a man who I assumed might not approve of my lifestyle, to say nothing of what my lifestyle had caused. "Yes, I confirm," I said. "Please provide me the known names and numbers of your needle sharing or sexual partners," he said. "Needle sharing?" "Yes, needle sharing and sexual partners. I don't do drugs anymore," I said, neglecting to clarify that my drug use never included syringes. I would fixate on this oversight for days afterward, worried that Ray would assume I was once some kind of junkie. "Well, your sexual partners then. Names and numbers, please." I didn't have the names and numbers to help Ray with his contact tracing. He would call at least twice more, each time more irritated than the last that I hadn't come up with these names and numbers. "You do know how serious this is, don't you? People deserve to know that their lives may be at stake," he'd said, making it clear that I harbored a contagion and could have possibly spread it. I was a public health crisis. My reaction to Ray's phone calls was a manifestation of some form of vanity. I was known for staring into a mirror after a fresh haircut, examining the razor clean, sharp lines, which rewarded my face with depth, and how my mustache and goatee were perfectly yoked, how they framed my mouth, made it supple. Now I feared no man would want me, might not ever answer my desire to be touched and his desire to be touched back by me, physically, spiritually, emotionally. The grim facts of my past remained. I engaged in too much touching without regard to my health, too much democratizing the body until I found myself infected with HIV and a persistent, awful notion haunting my thoughts. How often would I have to plead with a man not to be afraid of my body? Thank you very much.
Well, I had to take a moment, Darius. Oh, just absolutely beautiful. And I really appreciate your candor. And I so respect your ability to educate us as well as enthrall us. And again, I'm just so honored that you agreed to be with us tonight and share your incredible work. We have, of course, comments in the chat reflecting my feelings as well. People are just in awe. So thank you so very much for sharing your work. That you can buy Ben's and Darius's books. Ben's are at benkleinonline.wordpress.com. Darius at dariusantoine.com. We're kind of featuring Dead Uncles tonight for Ben from Driftwood Press. And Be Not Afraid of My Body, a lyrical memoir by Belt Publishing, and also Intimacies in Borrowed Light from Eastover Press for Darius. And just excellent, excellent books all around. So I hope you all will consider investing in those. So I like to take a little time at the end for just a quick Q&A because we have you here. And so, Ben, if you also wanted to turn on your camera, we'll just kind of make this the three of us at one time. I hope Leah can do that. I hope I'm not putting her on the spot with that. If not, we can just go back, Leah, to the full window, and that'll be fine too. But I have a question for you all, and maybe we'll start with Ben. And I'm just going to ask you to tell me about your people. And Ben, you sort of started to do that at the beginning of your offering, and maybe you'd like to expand a little bit. And this can be your ancestors, your immediate family, your coworkers. You know, I'm open. We can meet this sweet little doggy that we're seeing here on Darius' screen if we want to. So, yes, please. So I think I'll just say we'll go in the order that we did. And so, Ben, if you want to start us out with that question.
What to say about my people? I mean, my people are farmers. This picture behind me are actual cattle down on my dad's. Well, it's my youngest brother's farm now. Yeah, they came to the States in 1842. I like the great grandfather who would have been born shortly after that. Like there's daguerreotypes of him from about 1868. Like we look like the same person. I'm his clone. It's really creepy. Don't know much about them before they came to America. My grandmother had the family tree that went all the way back to like the 1740s in Germany, but we didn't really know anything about those folks. But yeah, and so my father and one of my brothers still currently live on the original, like the family farm, and my cousins have the original homestead. And then we live on the next holler over is where I grew up. And so my people, all farmers, big extended family. That's why a lot of the poetry is cousins and uncles and dead uncles and live aunts and folklore and strange terminology and lots of cousins, like all the different layers of cousins and what is an in-law versus, you know, kin and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, they're a constant source of amusement and inspiration. And I will say that I don't ever write directly about anything that ever happens to anybody. I'm always very respectful of that. And as my father will tell anyone, well, he likes to exaggerate, but I always tell him that's the point, right? Like I ain't here to spill nobody's tea or tell the business, because Appalachians, Carrie, you know this, will smile and be real nice to you. But the minute you go around the corner, we talk from head. Oh, we are talking about you for at least 5 minutes. And that's if you were interesting. If you weren't interesting, we're just like, yeah, and go about our day. So yeah, there is a lot of sort of dramatic effect to the words to sort of give it that pull for the general audience. And Yeah, so some of them enjoy it, some of them do not. My mother couldn't stand it. She really disliked and she took offense and it's sort of say, well, that is not what happened. And I'm like, I know that's the point. Um, but I think secretly she enjoyed being the subject and the object of a great amount of words. So she just didn't want to admit it because then that would be giving me something, and that's too much, right? Like sometimes we have that gravity with our parents where they want us to continue to be the satellite and they're still the star, right? And just sort of that how gravity and orbit changes as we age. So yeah, I look at it fondly.
How about you, Darius?
Yeah, it's like, can I get a mute? Yeah, then I have to follow up by immediately saying my mother is not too keen on being both the subject or object of my writing. Um, I have in the past written, say, about her nipples, that she did not really care for, particularly when some of her best friends kind of made fun of her, you know. But I was talking, within context, I was talking about being an 8-year-old child, seeing, my mother's, naked for the first time. And I think, yeah, that poem ended with me saying that's probably what made me gay. That's the assumption. Um, I say it, it's a poem, so you have to say it a bit more. I like how Ben in your poem you said you don't like girls the right way. I love that pause. Was that a line break there? Yeah. Or no?
It's a prose poem,
The prose poem?
so it was punctuation pauses.
Okay, I got you. But no, it would have been a great delineated poem too, and a good not line break right there because it was so perfect. So yeah, my father, on the other hand, couldn't stop talking about my work. He wanted me to write about him. Um, in a way that was a little off-putting because it's like, no, this, you're not going to use me to, flex your ego. But no, he really did champion my work. He passed away from alcoholism actually in 2022. Which I write, well, I don't write about that in the book because he was still living then, but I do write about being part of this lineage of alcoholics on that side of the family in particular, and having come so close to being another kind of victim, I guess, to alcoholism. Because there have been many Stewart men, um, that I know of anyway, who have passed away from alcoholism. So yeah, my people are a really good source of inspiration and material if I, choose to use it. Um, and I like to think that, my mother is a Midwesterner. She comes from Michigan City, Indiana. My father was born in Jamaica, Queens, New York. So like yin and yang, is what produced me. I like to think of it that way. Um, so it's interesting, to hear Ben talk. Like this, like literally, like the sound of your voice. Like that you could be, you're not Southern necessarily because you're Ohioan. Um,
It's Appalachian. That's the
Appalachian.
twang. That's the sound you hear.
Exactly. It's Appalachian. I am Appalachian too. We don't think about being from Knoxville, Tennessee as being from Appalachia, but I am. And we are a y'all versus, instead of a yuns, where I'm from. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that in terms of who my people are. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Oh, I couldn't ask for better answers. That was perfect. That's exactly what I love to hear. And Darius, I don't know if we discussed it, but I had my suspicions that you had Appalachian in your background. I did. So I'm so happy to hear that. Yay. Okay. So a bunch of Appalachians here tonight at the wheel. So we're about to close down the house tonight, but I wanted to read just one little poem from my new book, Dirt Songs from Eastover Press. And in honor of our question for tonight, I'm going to tell you where I'm from. A little bit in that way, sort of about my people. So this is the opening poem. I've nuked toe of frog. Where I'm from, girls learn to conjure young. A dash of salt flung, I lick my pointer finger, spin 3 times, call forth the tufted trills of white and bone flute. Early on, I partnered up, roused with hope. What I got was someone else's stiff neck, the shape of someone else's arrogance siphoning the pith from my spine. My hollow bird bones winnow stories I don't want to hear. I shush each saga. Too much prattle, unweighted, could damn well loose a demon. Thank you all so much for all of you who came out tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to all who are going to watch later. Thank you to Darius and Ben so much for being with us tonight. Thank you to the Dairy Barn Arts Center and the Ohio Arts Council. And I really want you to buy our guest books. This is what keeps them getting published. When their publishers do well, we do well. So please buy the books. And I'd like you to join me next month to hear the extraordinary David Baker and the Ohio Anna Book Award winner, Marianne Chan. So until we meet again, friends, I'll say good night and be well. Bye now.